The claims smacked of hyperbole. Let me try this one. Quote, since becoming governor, Susana Martinez has orchestrated one of the most remarkable economic turnarounds in New Mexico history, end quote. Wow. That was part of a large section on the state in a recent United Airlines magazine that was highlighted by the Santa Fe Reporter. And while it's true that some sectors such as oil production are booming, economists say it's a mixed picture for us here in New Mexico. Unemployment rose in June, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Only 3 industry sectors have more jobs than before the recession started, and those jobs that have come back tend to pay less than before the recession. That's according to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Meanwhile, the Legislative Jobs Council has approved a $73 million proposed package of initiatives to create thousands of jobs here, and even skeptics anticipate growth in southern New Mexico from border business, oil development, and potash mining. Joining me to talk about this in other news of the week is Rob Nicoleski of the New Mexico Watchdog. And we welcome back line regular Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group. Also here this week is line regular Laura Sanchez-Rive with Sanchez Legal Solutions. And returning to the table is former Lieutenant Governor Diane Deneuve. Rob, let me talk about oil production. Something's working there. You reported on this. We really jumped up the ranks here. What's going on? And also, is it enough to cure what ails us in other sectors?
I'll answer the second question first. Is it enough? No, it's not enough all by itself. But boy, if it wasn't for what we're seeing as far as the energy boom, New Mexico would really be in trouble. And the United States would be in trouble too, because the economy has really gotten a real boost from that. And the big reason why is because of the technology of hydraulic fracturing, and especially in the Permian Basin, which extends into New Mexico. And because of that, New Mexico jumped up a spot from 6th to 5th most oil-rich state in the country in a survey done by 24/7 Wall Street this week.
Lieutenant Governor, good to see you again. You're no stranger to that part of the state we're just talking about. What does it mean for the rest of us? I'm still curious, when oil production bumps, do the rest of us feel an automatic bump as well?
Well, there's more money into the state coffers, and that's an important thing for the general fund and for the budget. So that's important. But I think in terms of the employment picture, already you see numbers that show that unemployment in those areas is almost at a 2 or 3%. Many Texans are coming over to work in New Mexico's Permian Basin as this boom continues. Having lived in that area and watched the booms and the bust, we need something else, because it won't by itself, as Rob said, it is not a solution for us. It could be a temporary bump to our budget, but it's not a diversified economic picture for New Mexico.
Makes sense. Tom Garrity, good to see you as well. We had the Energy Secretary in our state doing a number of things, looking at WIP, talking about our energy business, though, especially. They're doing a series of meetings around the country and looking at different locations where our energy needs tied to economic development is looking at getting a hard look from the federal government. Where do we stand here? Are we in a good position to take advantage of lots of energy potential here beyond oil?
Yeah, well, I mean, New Mexico definitely has, a great opportunity, great potential for various types of energy. Wind energy, is great in the eastern part of the state. The southwestern part of the state is number 3 in the world for being able to accommodate solar arrays. The big challenge with all of those is we can have the greatest renewable energy resources around, but it's getting that energy from point A to point B onto the grid that is really going to be the big challenge. So, the Renewable Energy Transmission Authority has this work cut out for them. There have been many different types of discussions as far as how to move energy from eastern New Mexico to Albuquerque, and from southwest New Mexico to California. Still a lot of conversation, not a lot of action, but these things are very heavily regulated, and they take a lot of time. I think the SunZia case in the southern part of the state is case in point on that.
Exactly right. However, let me go back to what I referenced in this United Airlines picture, rosy picture of New Mexico. You would think that every company in the world would be beating a path to our door from this thing. And I realize, there's an audience. They even said in the Santa Fe Reporter article, it's not a general interest publication. How did you take this? Is it unholistic to look at our place just cherry picking the good stuff? Do you have to accommodate everything?
Well, I think you have to look at that article as propaganda. I mean, it's I don't think it's good reporting to start with. I mean, it's definitely one picture. It's almost like they took some press releases and some reports and condensed it into a fluff piece.
Right.
I mean, and if that's the kind of magazine quality that they have on on their on the airline, that's fine. But it really doesn't paint a whole picture. And I think the fact that they didn't look at other sources or do basic searches online about other reports that counter all of that, I think says a lot about the quality of the reporting there. I do think it was an optimistic look, and I think to say that this governor has created this economic boom is just flies in the face of what we all know. There's chronic underemployment. There's still people that are having a really tough time bouncing back from the recession. We've seen some growth in certain sectors, and I think we could potentially see growth in other sectors, but I don't see that happening from the governor's office so far, and I don't really see that that's changed very much for most people.
Sure. Diane, I have another point on the Energy Secretary who was here. I was very much struck by his comments regarding technology transfer and the fact that for us with national labs here, we have this amazing opportunity to take what's being developed in these national labs and make them consumer-facing somehow and really take advantage of a lot of that. I took his quote as rather lukewarm about the potential, meaning some help from the federal government about all this. What did you take away from that?
I thought it was less than lukewarm. I thought it was very cool because, as he said very clearly, this is not our priority, which means New Mexico, that we're going to have to figure out that entrepreneurial path through the new Innovate Albuquerque, perhaps through the new UNM Science and Technology Center, continuing the work of that. But that is another one that is slow to grow. It's like watching grass grow when you're trying to do that. And I just
But as you know, Lieutenant Governor, that's been almost the holy grail for a lot of years around here, the idea of technology transfer. And we've had our successes. There have been some wonderful things that come out of the labs. But is this a point of we're not making enough demands on the labs? And can we make demands on the labs as citizens here? And can they hear us?
Well, I think it's two things. I think once they get out and they get a little bit of traction and a venture capitalist comes in and takes them somewhere else.
Right.
That's a problem for us in New Mexico, and especially because our own venture capital is very limited. This administration was very negative about venture capital, and capital goes where capital's welcome. We've had to rebuild that, take a chance. And the United Airlines article, it's a spin that does not match our reality, and that's unfortunate, but maybe it will open some doors to some people that will make some inquiries.
Right.
And if that happens, we'll have to take what we can get.
The editor guaranteed that jobs follow these articles. I'm not quite sure how that works. That was very interesting to me.
From his lips to
Right, exactly. The jobs numbers, however, are not great for us here. Unemployment ticked up in June. We've got some challenges here. Speak again in the question of balance. Are we rising? Are we falling? Are we still at par? What's happening here?
Well, I don't think the economic situation right now is good. I mean, and you can point fingers at the governor's office. You can also point fingers at the legislative branch. But the bottom line is that New Mexico has been too dependent on government money. In fact, someone from an official with the Fed out of Kansas City said that just last week. Now, the trick is, how do you make that transition? And there's lots of ideas out there, but turning that into reality is the real trick.
Well, Tom, one of the pieces this past week was about entrepreneurship and the amount of entrepreneurs. We really need to beef up on that. That's a big part of what we're lacking.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some great initiatives. I've been a big supporter, still am, of Gary Opadahl and what he's trying to accomplish with Innovate Albuquerque.
He's our economic development director here for the city.
He is for the city, a proven entrepreneur. The ABQ ID is the first step. It's actually created after a framework of startup communities by Brad Feld out of Boulder. But when you take a look at startup communities, we're not looking at an instant fix. Boulder was a 20-year success story, just in the making, to get to the point where they could really make an impact. But entrepreneurism is very important. It's very critical, and we have to do what we can to support it. On the United Airlines piece, I choose not to even think of that as editorial. It's advertorial. I mean, whether money was exchanged or not,
Right.
It's one particular perspective, and I think in New Mexico, what we've learned to do and what we have to continue to do is we have to fake it until we make it.
Yeah.
We have to be able to say, hey, we've got to look at the positive things here in the area. We need to be able to focus on that.
That's right.
Not ignoring the harsh realities
That's right.
that are there that a lot of us have seen firsthand.
I mentioned to set up the Jobs Council, and some ideas in the legislature are starting to bubble to the surface. And this is always the fundamental question: how much can our legislature or government, in the broadest sense, actually do to spur things, and how much can they not? But in your sense of the Jobs Council and what they're trying to get
Well, I
at.
think a lot of the information the Jobs Council has been considering is really important. I mean, they've heard from a number of different experts, including Dr. Jim Peach from NMSU, who talked about a variety of different sector, assistance in particular sectors that could help really increase the amount of jobs and economic development. But one of the interesting things, to Rob's point about our dependency on government. One of the strongest areas for construction is public building construction. I mean, when we talk about dependency on government, we're not just talking about tax breaks or tax incentives. We're also talking about actual jobs in terms of buildings, and that's a huge sector for the building industry, and one that I don't think often gets talked about. How it's not the residential boom that's keeping those construction companies afloat. It really is public buildings in most cases, and so I think we need to go back to the table and figure out what is viable and what we can do to diversify our economy, because we do have a strong dependency on a particular sector, oil and gas, that's tied to our budget. And long term, I agree with the Lieutenant Governor that that's just not going to be realistic for keeping us afloat.
Exactly right. Up next, we wrap up our series on the water crisis in the West.